The air in the Führerbunker is recycled, tasting of diesel, stale cigarettes, and the metallic tang of fear. 30 feet of reinforced concrete and earth pressed down from above, but it isn't the weight of the soil that is crushing the occupants. It is the vibration, a low, rhythmic thumping that rattles the silver in the dining room and shakes the dust from the ventilation ducts. The Stalin organs. Soviet Katyusha rockets are shredding the Tiergarten, turning the heart of the capital into a landscape of splinters and ash. The Red Army is less than 500 yards away, their tanks grinding over the rubble of the Reich Chancellery. Adolf Hitler stands over a map table in the Situation Room. His left hand is tucked behind his back, trembling with a violence he can no longer hide. His eyes, once described as hypnotic, are sunken and glazed. He is moving wooden blocks across the paper, ordering the 9th Army and the 12th Army to launch a massive pincer movement to save the city. It is a physical obstacle disguised as a tactical maneuver. The armies do not exist. They are ghosts, shattered remnants of teenagers and old men huddling in ruins, possessing no fuel, no ammunition, and no hope. The telephone lines are cut. The radio is a wall of static. The 1,000-year Reich has been reduced to a few claustrophobic rooms and a garden full of shell craters. He is staring at a total collapse. If a miracle does not happen in the next 60 minutes, the heavy steel doors of the bunker will be kicked in by soldiers who have fought their way from the Volga to the Spree. The end isn't coming. It is already in the hallway. This is the decisive moment. This is not just a lost battle or a failed campaign. It is God mirroring the twilight of the gods. For 12 years, the Nazi machine had presented itself as a weapon from the future. They had the jet engines, the ballistic rockets, and a terrifyingly efficient doctrine of blitzkrieg that had rewritten the map of Europe in blood. But the secret that truly determined the fall was simpler and far more ancient. Hubris. The stakes were total. If the regime fell, the entire world order would pivot. The old empires of Europe were already dead, their bones bleached by 6 years of total war. In their place, a new struggle was being born between the rising titans of the West and the East. Berlin is a rib cage, and the heart has stopped beating. The road to this concrete tomb began 4 years earlier in the endless wheat fields of the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa was the gamble that broke the back of the Reich. The Nazis believed in the impossible odds. They thought the Soviet Union was a house of cards that would collapse with one kick to the door. They ignored the logistics. They ignored the mud, the rasputissa that turned the Russian roads into a thick, black glue that swallowed entire tank divisions. They ignored the winter that turned their engine oil into jelly and their soldiers' fingers into brittle ice. They were winning until the math of attrition caught up with them. Stalingrad was the pivot point. An entire army, the 6th, was swallowed by the ruins of a city that became a symbol of resistance. From that moment on, the ticking clock of the Reich began to accelerate. The ordinary people of the Allied nations, the factory workers in Detroit, the coal miners in the Urals, the codebreakers in a country house in England, started out producing the Reich in a war of industrial grit. The fall was not just a moral collapse. It was a mathematical certainty dictated by the laws of logistics. The Nazi strategy relied on high-tech but low-volume engineering. Their tanks, like the Tiger and the Panther, were masterpieces of over-engineering. They were terrifying on the battlefield, but they were mechanical nightmares. A Tiger tank required specialized parts and expert mechanics that could rarely be found on a retreating front. Meanwhile, the Allies utilized the radical standardization of parts. A bolt from an American Sherman tank could fit another Sherman. The war was won by the assembly line as much as the bayonet. But the real codebreaker was literal. At Bletchley Park, a team of mathematicians and eccentrics had cracked the Enigma machine. This was the ultra-secret. The Nazis were sending secret radio messages that the Allies were reading in real time. When Hitler ordered a desperate counterattack, the Allies often knew the time, the place, and the number of tanks before the German field commanders even received their orders. The Nazis were playing a high-stakes game of chess against an opponent who could see through the back of every card in the deck. Then came the oil problem. By early 1945, the Allied strategic bombing campaign had successfully targeted the synthetic oil plants at places like Luna. The equation for the Nazi collapse was simple. Fuel consumption was far greater than fuel production. The mighty Luftwaffe was grounded, not by a lack of pilots, but by empty tanks. The armored divisions were reduced to horse-drawn wagons. The Nazi machine had run out of blood. Back in the bunker, the outside-the-box solution is the ultimate act of cowardice. Hitler knows the Soviets are in the U-Bahn tunnels beneath the city. He has seen the reports of what happened to Mussolini strung up by his heels in a public square. He will not be a trophy. He will not be paraded in a cage through Moscow. The physical obstacle is now the door to his private study. Inside, he and Eva Braun carry out the final directive of a failed empire. A single shot rings out at 3:30 p.m. The guy who promised 1,000 years of glory wrapped up his reign with a bullet and a little vial of poison. His staff, following his final paranoid orders, carry the bodies up to the Chancellery garden. They pour 200 liters of precious gasoline over the remains in a shell hole. They strike a match. The wind from the Soviet shells whips the flames into a frenzy. The Götterdämmerung is not a grand opera. It is a bonfire in a pile of trash. The machine is dead. The will is gone. In the streets above, the remaining Nazi officers are using white bed sheets as flags, desperate to survive the vengeance they spent a decade inviting. What was the final cost of this ticking clock scenario? 70 million dead, a continent reduced to ash and rubble. The people who didn't make it, the millions murdered in the death camps, the soldiers lost in the biting frost of the Volga, the civilians vaporized in the firestorms of Dresden. They are the true legacy of the collapse. The long-term impact was 0 hour. Germany was partitioned. The Iron Curtain descended, and the world learned a brutal lesson. The Nazi secret was that they were never a machine of destiny. They were a cult of personality that crashed into the cold, hard wall of reality. The clock stopped in 1945, but the echoes of that ticking are still heard today, a constant reminder of the price of silence in the face of tyranny.